It's my pleasure to welcome you to Answers from Scripture. Whether you're just being introduced to the Bible for the first time or you've been studying it for a lifetime, I'm confident that you'll benefit from Brother Mark's passionate explanations for the Word of God.
Hey friends, welcome back. I'm your host, Brother Mark. This is Answers from Scripture, and today's question is the oldest question we've had yet. And it's because Cain asked it. That was a long, long time ago. If you turn to Genesis chapter 4, or just listen, because I'll turn there for you. Genesis chapter 4, verse 9, "And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper?" The question for today's video comes right from the text, am I my brother's keeper? I've gotten a lot of people talk to me over the years, and as the father of a large family, there's a family dynamic where older children will try to tell the younger children what to do, but then if you're away and they're babysitting, the younger children do something wrong. Well, you can't hold me accountable for what somebody else does. And there's always this response that goes to a Bible verse, and we're going to refer to that Bible verse here in just a minute, but every man shall give account of himself. In other words, I'm not my brother's keeper. You can't call me into account for something my brother did, or you can't call me into account for something one of my church members did, or you can't call me into account for something one of my children has done, or sometimes even an attempt to comfort people. They'll say, look, your children, they're over 18, they're grown now, God can't hold you accountable, they're adults making decisions for themselves. And I'm going to ask, is that biblical? Am I my brother's keeper? Is there any degree to which we're supposed to look out for one another, even to the extent that we will be held accountable? So let's turn to that verse in Romans, because that's the verse people quote, Romans chapter 14. And I've quoted it, you've quoted it, we've all quoted it, but I want us to look at it. Romans chapter 14 and verse 12. "So then every one of us shall give account of himself to God." Now what does it say? It says when we stand before God, we're going to give account of ourselves. What doesn't it say? It doesn't say we're going to give account for other people. But what else does it say? It doesn't say we won't give account for other people. It's simply stating one fact, that when we stand before God, I will give account of myself, and you will give account of yourself. But does it mean it doesn't matter what other people do, and it has nothing to do with us, what other people do? It's interesting in the context. Context is key. In the context, in verse 7, just 5 verses before it we read, "For none of us liveth to himself, and no man dieth to himself." The things that I do, the things that you do, those things influence other people around us. Whether we like it or not, people watch us. Whether we like it or not, some people are going to follow us. And to the extent that people are imitating us or following us or are under our authority, clearly there's some accountability factor there, and we're going to see that even more in some other scriptures. But now let's go further. Okay, verse 12, "So that every one of us shall give account of himself to God." But the very next verse says, "Let us not therefore judge one another anymore, but judge this rather, that no man put a stumbling block or an occasion to fall in his brother's way." So verse 12 says you're going to give account of yourself, and verse 13 says because you're going to give account of yourself, make sure you don't mess things up for somebody else. Which sounds to me like part of our self-accountability is the way we deal with our fellow man, the way we help them or hinder them in their walk with God. And different people are going to have different levels of authority and accountability in other people's lives. Consider 1 Samuel. We're going to go back to 1 Samuel chapter 3. The story is famous because Samuel has just been weaned from his mother. He's a very young boy, and now he's been brought to serve under Eli in the temple. And he's laying in bed one night, and he hears his name, Samuel, Samuel. You know the story. He jumps out of bed, he runs to Eli's room, and he says, "Yeah, what do you need?" I heard you call my name. And Eli said, I go back to bed. I didn't call your name. And he hears, Samuel, Samuel. He jumps out of bed. He runs and he talks to Eli. And Eli says, go back to bed. I didn't call your name. And it happens a third time. And Eli says, look, I think God's trying to talk to you. The next time you hear Samuel, Samuel, say, speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. And then he goes back to bed and hears Samuel, Samuel. He says, speak, for thy servant heareth. And here's part of God's answer. Listen carefully to what God said to Samuel. Verse 13 of 1 Samuel 3. For I have told him being Eli, that I will judge his house meaning his family, forever, for the iniquity which he knoweth. And he knew about some sin, listen to this, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. Now here we have a situation. Eli's an adult, his sons are adults. And yet Eli, he hasn't made himself vile. His sons, Hophni and Phinehas, they've made themselves vile. And yet God says your whole family is going to be brought to account. And you're going to suffer, and I'm going to judge your house, and I'm going to hold you accountable. Why? Because you knew what they were doing, and you did nothing to stop them. Well, it sounds to me like God, but there's nothing in the Bible about this magical age 18. I hear it all the time, well, they're 18, there's nothing you can do. Well, show me the Bible verse about that one. They're 18, there's nothing you can do. Now, clearly, children grow and they become more and more independent from their parents, especially when they get married. Clearly, a new household is formed, and now they leave father and mother and cleave to their spouse, and there's a new family unit with a new authority figure. But there's no magic number of 18. The day they turn 18, the day before they're 18, you're completely accountable to them and have authority over them. The day after they turn 18, they can do their own thing. Where is that in the scriptures? We act like that. We've gotten that worldly philosophy ingrained into us, but that's not in the Bible. Here's Eli with adult children, and God said you knew what they were doing, and you knew it was wrong, and you knew it was vile, and you did nothing to interfere, you did nothing to stop them, so I'm going to judge your whole family for it. Accountability. We're going to look at just one more scripture, but Hebrews chapter 13. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 7 and 17 are both about obeying those who are in a spiritual authority over us. By the way, Eli was not only an authority figure over Hophni and Phinehas because he was their father, but he was also the priest in charge of what went on there at the church or the house of God at that time, and they were ministers within that, so they were also somewhat assistants of his. So he had, in two ways, he had a responsibility and accountability for them. But I want to read Hebrews 13:17. Listen, obey them, it says, that have the rule over you, and submit yourselves, for they watch for your souls, listen to these next words, as they that must give account. They're watching for your souls, how? As people that have to give account. For what? Apparently for your souls. Yeah, everybody, when we stand before God, everybody's going to give account of himself. From the church janitor to the church pastor, everybody will give account of himself. But the church pastor is going to do more than just give account of himself. He's going to give account of your souls and what he did to try to keep you from doing wrong. Is a lot of young people today that aspire to influence, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. I want my outreach to grow. I want more influence. I want more authority even. As long as we understand that with the growth of influence and authority comes also a greater accountability. And yes, you are accountable for yourself, but no man liveth to himself, and no man dieth to himself. We also have accountability for those whom we influence. And I pray God will help us to take that very, very seriously. If you're in authority, that you take it seriously. If you're under authority, that you take that seriously, and that we submit ourselves to one another in the fear of the Lord, realizing that those who lead us, secular bosses, government officials, moms and dads, preachers, those who lead us, have been given their authority to do so by God, and God is going to hold them accountable for how they do it. I hope that answers the question. In a sense, Cain, yes, you were born first. Yes, you are your brother's keeper to a certain degree. Even if you weren't your brother's keeper, that's no excuse for doing him harm, which you did. You did him harm, and you're trying to get out of answering the question. That's all that was. But if we answer the question, yes, to a degree, you are your brother's keeper, and God will ultimately hold you accountable for how you responded to that authority given you. God bless. Have a good week. I'll see you next time. Don't forget to share the videos and subscribe. And I pray that this video somehow helps you and helps you to help others. Goodbye.
Thanks so much for listening. If you have a question you'd like to have answered, mention it in the comments field below, or visit us at www.answersfromscripture.online.